In this video, I'm going to walk through a sourcing decision as part of differential analysis. We're faced with a company that manufactures a variety of engines for use in heavy equipment. To this point, they've always produced all of the parts for this engine, including a carburetor. And according to financial accounting with full absorption costs, the unit cost, including materials, labor, and both components of overhead, both variable and manufacturing, would be $42 per unit to make that carburetor. An outside supplier, however, is offered to sell the carburetor instead of Troy having to manufacture it for $35 per unit. Well, on the surface, it seems like, yeah, we would want to jump on that purchase because if they're going to only charge $35 and knowing nothing else, assuming quality is the same in those types of things, and it costs us $42 to manufacture, it seems like an obvious decision. The problem is there may be some costs that we include within this $42 that really aren't going to disappear if we no longer manufacture the carburetor. So we need to make a sourcing decision. It used to be called a make or buy decision, and we're going to compare our analysis of what it truly costs to make that carburetor versus buy that carburetor, both on a per unit basis, and also multiply it times the fact that we typically had previously made 15,000 carburetors. So we have a true comparison. So let's start out. Well, the only unit cost of buying is the $35 that the outside supplier is going to charge us. We don't show any shipping charges or anything like that. That's it for the unit cost of buying it. Now let's look at the relevant unit cost of making it. Is direct materials relevant? Well, yes. If you buy the carburetor, you don't have to pay $14 in direct materials. If you make the carburetor, you have to pay $14 in direct materials for every single carburetor. Can't make one without the materials. So we're going to list $14 for direct materials under make. Is direct labor relevant? Well, given no other information that our labor is fixed and would utilized elsewhere, and we can hire and fire our workers according to the demand that we have, our assumption is direct labor would be relevant, and we would list the $10 in direct labor under make because we could get rid of these employees if we buy. Variable overhead of $3 per unit. Yes, that would be relevant. It might include things like the cost of electricity to run equipment, supplies, those types of things, again, that vary based upon whether or not we make it. So we're going to list the $3 for variable overhead. Now we're going to get to our fixed manufacturing overhead that's traceable. So in a previous video, I talked about a little bit about the difference between traceable and common. The assumption for traceable, given no other information, exists to support a particular segment or process like the carburetor here, and if you get rid of it, it disappears if I'm given no other information. Well, we've got a little asterisk here, so let's read through for that $6 of fixed manufacturing overhead that's traceable. 1/3 of it is supervisory salaries, and given no other information, our assumption is we don't make the carburetor anymore, we don't need the supervisor salaries. But 2/3 of that special equipment, even though it's traceable to making the carburetor, has no resale value, so it means whether or not we make or buy the carburetor, we're still stuck with the equipment and its depreciation. Even if we get rid of it, we'll have to write off the depreciation. So only 1/3 of the $6 is relevant. It takes 6 times 1/3 would be $2, because that's the supervisor I would need to pay for $2 if I make it, but I don't need to pay it if I buy it. The other 2/3 for the special equipment, or $4, is irrelevant because it's going to exist whether I make or buy it in this situation. Fixed manufacturing overhead common. I'm not going to list anything. A common fixed expense, given no other information, is there to support the company overall, and even if I take away the carburetor, it would still exist no matter if I make or buy. Now, you could make the argument, well, Lisa, why aren't you listing $9 under make and under buy? Well, I could do that, but since it's the same thing under both, why even list it? Because there's no difference between it. And that's the point of differential analysis. So if I go through here again and total things up, my total cost to buy is the outside supplier cost of $35. My total relevant cost to make it, ignoring the irrelevant costs that aren't different between make or buy, $14 of direct material, $10 of direct labor, $3 of variable overhead, and $2 of fixed overhead that's traceable and relevant. Remember, the other $4 is not, is $29 is the relevant cost per unit of making it. Now, I'm just going to multiply this out times 15,000 carburetors because that's what we need. 35 times 15,000, the total relevant cost to buy is $525,000. Direct materials, relevant $14 to make times 15,000 is $210,000. If I take the direct labor of 10 times 15,000, that's $150,000. Variable overhead, 3 times 15,000 is $45,000. Fixed manufacturing overhead traceable, 2 times 30,000, or 2 times 15,000 is $30,000. And again, I add all these up. Relevant cost of making, $210,000 plus $150,000 plus $45,000 plus $30,000. The relevant total cost to make all 15,000 carburetors is $435,000 versus the relevant cost to buy is $525,000. Now let's compare in this example. Let's start per unit. $35 to buy, only $29 relevant dollars to make. That's a $6 difference. In fact, it costs $6 more to buy. So there's a $6 disadvantage. Think about your perspective. $6 disadvantage of buying the carburetors because it's $6 more. When we look at it on a total basis, $525,000 to buy, $435,000 to make. It costs $90,000 more to buy compared to make, so that's a disadvantage. So what's the decision? Well, it costs a lot more to buy versus make, so we're going to continue to make it in order to save profitability. We could throw another wrinkle into this situation. So assume all other facts, but if we chose to purchase the carburetors, it could free up enough capacity to launch a new product line that would add a segment margin of $150,000. Remember, segment margin is contribution margin minus traceable fixed expenses. Given the new assumption, would we still, our decision before was it's less costly to make, let's continue to make. Would we still want to continue to make, or would we buy? What would be the financial advantage or disadvantage? We need to talk about opportunity costs. Opportunity costs is a benefit that you forgo as part of making one decision versus another. So if we choose to buy, we would earn an additional $150,000. So the way our text has chosen to present this is they've said, well, if we can earn an extra $150,000 if we free up the capacity, let's subtract that $150,000 from our prior total cost to buy of $525,000. And so that would bring our relevant cost to buy down to $375,000, still leaving our relevant cost to make at $435,000. Subtracting that $375,000 from the $435,000 cost to make it, it's actually $60,000 less costly, cost $60,000 less to buy versus make. There's an advantage of buying the carburetors. So in this situation, if we can free up capacity and earn an extra $150,000, knowing no other difference in quality and those types of things, we would proceed with buying the carburetors from the outside supplier.